Well, joining us right now is David Cohen. He's the author of The Privatization of Everything: How the Plunder of Public Goods Transformed America and How We Can Fight Back. He wrote it with Alan McCallion. Please welcome Donald Cohen. Thank you, Donald, for taking time to be with us.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I don't mean to embarrass you, but the book is just fantastic. You were on the Ralph Nader Radio Hour, and I recommend everybody go listen to that show as a podcast. The thing that I'm an idiot. I think most Americans don't understand what privatization means because they've never seen a government step into the fray and actually take over an industry or a public good. So in the past 40 years, since Reagan was president, we've just lived through deregulation, the demonization of government, and turning everything over to the private sector. For a first grader, how would you explain the difference between a public good that's run by the government and a public good that has been privatized?
Okay, first grader. So, first off, I'd say not all public goods are run by the government, but they all need to be controlled by the government, right? That's kind of the distinction we make, right? We all eat. We don't make the government doesn't produce the food, but the government's role is to make sure we're healthy, right? Because that's healthy and with good nutrition and adequate supply of food. So the simple description is when the private market or private entities or corporations get control over the things that matter to us all: health, education, clean air, clean water, then their interests, profit, sales, profit, become paramount. They take money out of the system. I'm not sure this is the first grade version, so I probably should apologize, David. They take money away from providing goods and services because for profits and CEO salaries and all that, when we need that money. That's kind of one of the simple answers.
Let's start with schools. We're in a school, we're talking to first graders. It seems to me when this country was first founded, we had an idea of the utilitarian purpose of schools that would be provided as a public good by the government. Is that?
Yeah. We decided that everybody before we had public education and mandatory public education for everybody, parents and families were on their own. Some got educated, some didn't get educated. We decided as a society that everyone should be young people should be educated to be both productive adults and productive members of society, good citizens. So it's at one point we realized that, right?
And so all American citizens are entitled to a free public education paid for primarily by our tax dollars.
That's right. Now, but here's where it gets a little bit more complicated, right? That's still true. But the privatization of education comes through a variety of several ways, one of which is by school voucher policies that are happening in a number of states where a family can take their school voucher, the money that the student would have gotten, the money that would have been spent on that student, and take them to a private school. Okay, so it's our money, private school, but also the growth of charter schools, which is the same, they're publicly financed and privately operated. So what's going on there is we're saying, okay, everybody gets a basic dollar amount. They've turned it into a commodity, a dollar amount, rather than an outcome, an educated population. And they've said, okay, through these two mechanisms, said, let's put it on the market, in the market. Let's let the market decide who gets and who doesn't get, and how they get, and what they have access to. So everybody still has their voucher money, but no longer are we in a public education system that everybody's in.
You write, clearly, if you want to bring back segregation quickly, charters are the way to go.
Yep. Well, for a little bit of historical context for everybody, the privatization of public education began as a segregationist response to Brown versus Board of Education in the 1950s. White families did not want their kids did not want their kids in schools with Black kids. So what do? States passed voucher policies and then moved, where they could take their money and go to a segregation academy or a white flight academy. And then since we were drying up the public coffers, Black schools predominantly Black schools were closed in many places. And so that's where it all started. And again, the bigger idea here is put it in the market, let everybody choose individually, right? And they used the same language back then of school choice that is used today. But markets segregate, they stratify, they exclude. And so what we're seeing now, fast forward to today, is increasing segregation, increasing stratification, because people take their dollars and go. And schools are competing against one another for those dollars, which creates all kinds of other distortions.
So charter schools versus just plain old public schools. You write in the book that a lot of the leaders of charter schools differentiate between smart kids and stupid kids and try to court only the smart ones so that the tests skew better because they're only weed out the ones that they don't want and the ones they do want. What kind of education do you end up getting if you're only going to school with smart kids, or if it's homogenous? If you're only going to school with smart people of color or smart, is that good for a kid's brain?
No, it's not, because, it's almost silly to say that the nation is divided now. It's, in every which way. But one of the sources of division is we don't interact with one another. People from different perspectives, from different classes, from different religions, from different, belief systems, from, different geographies, perhaps.
But I don't need that. I want my kid to learn STEM, and I don't want him distracted because the kid next to him has some socioeconomic issue that interferes with my kid's ed. What does that have to do with my kid learning algebra?
Well, you asked that question perfectly. So here's what. First off, step back.
I didn't mean what I said.
Step back for a second, and we say, first off, yes, every parent, I have children, I have grandchildren now. We want, what's our top priority? Getting our kids educated, a good job, and all the above. Absolutely true. But it is also a fact, not just a value, that we need every child to be educated, right? So that's in our interest for every child to be educated. So that's number one. Number two is, I'll just go to what I teach my kids. I had two lessons: learn how to learn and learn how to see the world through someone else's eyes.
Empathy.
Right? Exactly. So I believe we have an empathy crisis in this country, a huge empathy deficit and an empathy crisis. And it kind of goes to the core. My favorite part of the book was the section on community, because when we don't interact in parks, in libraries, in schools, in the places that, make us equal, then we can't get an appreciation of the perspective and the experience of the others, which means that we're not going to solve the same problem, and that we can't then solve the big ones that affect us all.
You talk about resiliency, that these brains are developing, and without coming up but meeting people who are different, who think differently, have different struggles. Everybody's life is a struggle, no matter what socioeconomic class you're a member of. To understand everybody's struggle, you write, creates resiliency in a developing brain, and it teaches you how to handle all the frustrations that you will encounter. Even Bill Gates's daughter, the medical student, the doctor, she is going to face frustrations and setbacks. And that's what we want to train our kids to learn how to deal with setbacks.
And it happens in subtle ways too. It's important to understand this, I live in Los Angeles. When I go to the airport, which I've done frequently before COVID, I pay extra to drive as a single driver in the hot lane or the HOV lane.
Right.
Okay. And I get there a half hour quicker because I'm going to the airport at 6 a.m. So there's a problem with that. I look at it and go, I mean, there's two ways to look at that situation when you're the driver going 60 miles an hour or more.
Right.
One is, look at those people. We should all be able to drive it. Somehow we're not in it together here, right?
Right.
But the other way to look at it, the selfish way to look at it is, I paid for it, I deserve it, right? Either way, when we're not experiencing, I'm aware of this when I'm driving. If I believed I deserved it, then okay, that's a problem.
Right.
Because when you deserve it, when you're in a different experience and you believe you deserve it, then there's no reason to solve the problem of mobility to get to the airport or to work.
We're talking with Donald Cohn. He's the author of The Privatization of Everything, How the Plunder of Public Goods Transformed America and How We Can Fight Back. Go buy this book right now. And again, I will reimburse you if this doesn't light a fire underneath you. It's a great read, and it's written for people like me who aren't particularly bright. Libraries. I was talking earlier about Amazon. They are, besides bookstore destroyers, they are also publishing books, which I at one time would have been against the law if we had an antitrust division at the Justice Department. They have about 10,000 ebooks and audiobooks that they will not give to libraries. There is a war in this country against our libraries. If somebody came up with the idea of a library today, I have an idea. You get a card, you tell us where you live, and you can borrow books, CDs, videos, and we'll fine you if you keep it too long, but you can borrow this book for free. Would Americans in this current state agree to libraries?
Well, and it's also free. You don't even get charged for the card.
Right.
So let me parse that. Would Americans agree to that? Yes. Would conservatives who don't believe in government agree to that? No.
Right.
Right. And so, I'll give another example, because it's not all, in a different context. So I think we write about broadband, right? Broadband, access to the internet, we're on it right now. I think we all see as completely essential for survival at this point. It's as important as the roads and our transportation system. When telecom companies passed a law in Colorado to prevent cities from creating municipal broadband, cheaper and more accessible and more affordable, they gave cities the opportunity to vote for it, though, and if they wanted it. And every city that did voted overwhelmingly to create municipal broadband. So would they do that? Would they create postal banking? Yes. Would they create, all sorts of things libraries? Yes. In fact, I don't have.
Is it Escondido? Where's the city? Is it Escondido in California where people spoke out against the privatization of their libraries? What happened there?
Yeah, well, we work with them a little bit. LSSI, which is the primary private company that wants to run libraries, they're moving around the country to try to sell their wares. They say cheaper, they say better, faster, et cetera, et cetera.
Can you explain? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but a lot of this stuff is a little complicated. So we have libraries that are basically run by municipalities or they're private foundations, but they're in league with a school or some public good.
Usually there's cities have library systems and counties have libraries. And sometimes there's county libraries, but it's all public. These are public institutions. They're public buildings, they're public institutions. They're funded by the agency they're part of, the city budget. If it's in the city, if it's in the county, depending on what part of your, where you
So there's
live.
a company you write about
Yeah.
that wants its hands on our libraries.
That's right. So
who's funding them? Why do they want to run our our libraries? What's their motivation?
Well, the company's called LSSI. They're a corporation. I believe they're traded on this stock, public company traded on stock. Their motivation is very simple. They want to make money. So what they want to do is get control. They want to, have the city library system contract with them, hand them over a contract with them for them to run the library for, whatever period of time the contract is let for. So let's get into that a little bit. Now they say it's still public. We're just been hired to run it. Okay. So what's the impact of that? It's a private company. They have profit. Their CEO makes a lot of money. They have to borrow money to buy other companies because companies do that. So they say, we're going to do it cheaper, and it's just going to be just as good service. What do they, when they say they're going to do it cheaper, what do? First off, they cut wages and benefits because they don't really think librarians work very hard. So they're just sitting around. So they can cut the wages and benefits of librarians. Librarians are teachers. They are exalted in my view. They also do bulk buying. Okay, so the library collections, instead of having librarians with a sense of the community and a knowledge of books, choosing their collection, they'll bulk buy. So you'll get a dumbing down of the collections, of what's accessible. So you'll have less, interaction with kids who come in and need help with their homework. You'll have less opportunity for fewer hours. That happens because you have to cut costs, and that has happened.
And you write that libraries are our second responders.
And during the pandemic, they're second responders. They think about what's in your community that's public. There's the school, there's the post office, and there's the library. It's a community center. So the pandemic happens, and they, made hotspots available for kids to go in their parking lot who didn't have access to the internet. They responded to homeless crises. They became the place for tests and vaccines. It's a community center that has no, it's not about whether they can make money. They're not selling anything. They are. These are institutions are ours.
Right. They're the eyes and the ears, like the post office. They're the eyes and the ears for the community. And this is his name, Pezzant. What is Frank Pezzanite?
Yeah, I can't remember how to pronounce it. But yeah, he's the owner of LSSI, right? He, again, let me step back for a second. What do companies want to do? There's only one thing they want to do, and they want to sell things, and they want to make money selling them. So whether it's a library, a prison, a water system, anything, that's all they do is sell stuff. Right. And what do they care about? How much they can charge for it, how much it costs to make, what the profit margin is, how much of it they sell. I mean, that's all they care about. So
would you agree that everybody has a patriotic duty to get a library card? If you are wealthy, you have even more of an obligation to get a library card and take books out. Somebody said to me, I rather buy books because I want to support authors and publishers. When you take a book out from the library, are you helping publishers and authors?
Oh, absolutely.
How so?
Well, first off, I don't have the numbers, and I will get them after this discussion. The number of people who have library cards is strikingly large. It's larger than most people think. The usage of libraries is broader than people think. I've done a lot of these interviews since the book came out in late, just a few months back, and I've been delighted when people have interviewed me that have said, "Yeah, I found it in the library." Why? Because first off, and that's what I tell people to do. If you can afford it, buy it, and buy it from an independent bookstore. We want that. That's part of the whole mix of, how we learn in society. But if not, take it from your library. Maybe they'll get another copy, but maybe if not, someone else will get to read it, because the point of the book is not to make money and not to sell units. The point of the book is to move ideas and to educate.
There are thousands upon thousands of public and private libraries, and the more libraries that are in business, the more books are being purchased. They are the undergirding of the publishing industry. The problem and I want to talk about what happened in Escondido, because that's a city in California. I would assume most upper middle class, hyper-credentialed, educated people don't depend on libraries the way lower middle class people living at or below the poverty line who rely on libraries. I would assume that the people who have the most pull in government don't even know where their library is. And that's why even what happened in Escondido, the people were against the privatization of the libraries. And what happened?
Yeah, they were against it. They waged a vibrant campaign, but the city, the decision makers, I think it was the city council. Escondido was in northern San Diego County.
Right.
And the decision makers had decided that they were going to do it. Now, I wasn't there, so I don't know why, but I can speculate. One is they drank the Kool-Aid. Oh, it can be cheaper. We could save some money. How do you do that? You cut wages, or one less problem on our hands. Or they knew the company, or they believed in the free market. They had this belief that the government should do less. There's some pretty conservative corners of San Diego County, so it could be any number of those ideas, and the decision makers decided. But I will say, I found it with libraries, there is this sense of civic, that they are a civic institution that is, more than most things. That's broadly, not just among working class people, but I think there is some level of cross-class understanding of the civic role of libraries.
Right. So the big issues are Social Security and the privatization of Medicare and Medicare Advantage. Sometimes that feels insurmountable. So I'd like to just talk about what's happening locally where you can see this in action. Talk to me about the privatization of turnpikes and roads. And I think, is it Colorado? There was a road. What is the road you talk about? Is it in Colorado?
The Northwest Express, but we don't call them turnpikes in the West. I live in LA. We call them freeways because they're free.
Right. Time being, at least.
We have very few toll roads out here.
Right. What happens when you privatize the roads?
So here's what happens.
Why would you privatize a road that either the government builds a road and then turns it over to a private company? Why would they do that?
Well, I'll say, why do they do that? So this, I'll give like a real quick 30-second one-on-one. These are public-private partnerships where, the road in Colorado you referred to, there was a 99-year agreement between either the city of Denver or the Arapahoe County, I can't recall, to give control of that road for 99 years to a private consortium. And the private consortium would be fully responsible for upkeep, for maintaining it, for all of the above, for collecting the tolls, because that's where they make their money back, right? So there would be complete control. So why do folks do that? I think it's flawed reasoning, but I'll give you from their perspective. One of which is governments, we have massive needs of infrastructure to rebuild our roads and all that. There's a big need, and transit and broadband and all the above. They say government doesn't have the money. So we have to go to the private sector to get the money to do those things.
Government has the money, but the rich people don't want to pay taxes. So they say we don't have the money.
Exactly. But I'll even say a little bit more than that. I'll go even deeper, because they'll go to elected officials and say, you need your road fixed. You don't have the money. We have the $1 billion, and you won't have to pay new taxes. Very politically appealing. Okay. But there's a little, you have to ask one or two questions. So one is, borrowing the money is the easy part. You build a bridge or you build something, you need $1 billion, you got to borrow the money no matter who you are. You could buy it on the public, you can get public capital, municipal bonds, pretty cheap, or private, but that's the easy part. The hard part is paying it back. And there's only one place to get that money, us. So they'll say no new taxes, but things cost money. So the tolls go up because it has to, especially when you have profit. Either way, you have to pay it back no matter what.
How does it work? In other words, you're going to, you sell the road to this private company. They give you what, $5 billion?
They sell, yeah. They give. So first of all, it's not a sale; it's a long-term lease. Okay, 75 years, 90. That one was 99. They don't do 99s anymore, but 50, 60, 75 is typical. So it's it's privatization, but they say, no, we're just leasing it. But okay, so the private sector will give the public sector, a cash infusion, the public agency, and what they're doing is buying that control, that long-term lease. And what do they get for it? They get to collect the tolls. They get to, maybe run the concessions or gas stations, whatever. Let me give one example for you, because I think it's really illustrative. It's in the book about Chicago parking meters, if you recall.
Right. Before you do that,
Yeah.
because so they build this for-profit road that's maintained by a for-profit company. They raise the tolls, and what happened? What did drivers?
Oh, what do they do? Well, they do two things. One is they pay more, or they look for alternative routes, right? Because they can't afford it. So, historically, my co-author is a historian. I learned about this in our process. It was a process called shunpiking way back when. They shunned, truck drivers, and they, shunned the pike. They went around. But so of course, if it costs a lot and you can take an alternative road, you do it. But included in these long-term, very rigid contracts are non-compete clauses that prevent the agent, the jurisdiction, the county, the city, or what have you, from upgrading the competing roads, right? Or from creating mass transit, or for things, because you've signed a deal with them that protects their interests and profits.
So they're against mass transit because it cuts into their profits.
Well, yeah, I mean, I try to think, objectively. We made a deal. I'm the private side. We made a deal. I've calculated how much I was going to make for the life of this deal based on my projections of traffic and et cetera, et cetera. You change the deal, you compete with us, you got to pay us, or you can't do it, And right. So, from their perspective, fine. From our perspective, that's not our concern. Our concern is getting people around and saving the planet.
That's incredible. Anyway, talk to me about Chicago and the
parking
meters.
Yes, because it's similar. That's why I bring it up. Right. So, because it's a public-private partnership. It's not a new. On a Friday in 2008, maybe early 2009, cities bleeding red ink, right? Terrible time, recession. A consortium private consortium, Morgan Stanley, Wall Street, a sovereign wealth fund from the Middle East. It's a national investment company, and a national parking company. They told the mayor, they had given the proposal to the mayor, we will give you $1.1 billion up front. This is a city in desperate need, in exchange for this control of the city's 36,000 parking meters for 75 years until 2083. Vote on Tuesday. I'll cut to the chase. It's incredibly stupid to borrow money on your future revenue. Who knows if we'll be driving in 2083? I certainly won't. I know that. Probably you neither. Right. I don't know how old you are.
The way the flooding is going, we're going to need rowboats.
But here's the bottom line. Now, the city, for the life of the contract, for the next 61 years, if they want to eliminate parking spots for a dedicated bus lane to get people out of their cars and to solve the climate crisis, or bike lanes, or pedestrian malls where they just changed all land use pattern, they have to buy the spots back at the future value of the spot. That's a straitjacket on democracy. Now the city council and the mayor, going forward, can't do their job because they have to keep this private contractor whole. And by the way, the parking rates went way up, and they're making their money back in 15 years.
We've been talking with Donald Cohen. I hope you come back. He's the author of The Privatization of Everything: How the Plunder of Public Goods Transformed America and How We Can Fight Back. I have one question. I think I asked you this on the Ralph Nader show. Can you name one example of the government turning something over to private enterprise, having it run more efficiently and cheaper, where a public good became an even better public good because it was given over to the private sector? Can you give me one example?
Well, I do recall that question. I was as uncomfortable then as I am now in answering that, because I don't like to speak in universals. I bet there is one somewhere. I bet there may even be two, but I think it's, it's here's the, I don't remember what I said last time, but here's the thing, what I say, it's always, there are efficient companies, there are inefficient companies, there are efficient government agencies, there are inefficient. It's like life, everything is complicated, right? Here's the issue. Private sector has different interests than us. If they're going to take, no matter what they're going to do, they're taking money out of the service for profits. Right. Nothing else. It's a legitimate business thing to make company to make profit, but they're taking money out of the service. So they're going to spend less on the service. Okay. Public sector, so their job is to sell as much as possible. Our job is for as many people as possible to have things. So critically important to understand the difference in their interests, that they're different things, that there's market things and there's public things, and to make sure no matter who's providing the service, even if we contract for sanitation, that we're in charge.
Right.
We set rules, we set regulations. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I want to introduce you to Howie Klein. Howie, are you there?
I am so happy you're introducing us. I was going to ask you to do it once I got on. Yes, I'm here.
It's Donald Cohn, author of The Privatization of Everything, How the Plunder of Public Goods Transformed America and How We Can Fight Back. You should know Howie Klein. I
think I'm familiar with your work, Howie.
Yeah. And why don't I do this? Why don't we wrap it up and then I'll send an email where we introduce you. Let me give the Feldman guarantee on this book. I promise you, this will explain to you the difference between a public good and the privatization, why privatization has to be stopped. And if this book doesn't explain things clearly to you, the whole gamut, locally, bridges, tunnels, all the way up to Social Security and our military, the privatization of our military. If this book doesn't explain it all to you in a clear and concise way and light a fire, I will reimburse you. That's how important this book is. It's called The Privatization of Everything, How the Plunder of Public Goods Transformed America and How We Can Fight Back. Buy 10 copies of this book and give them out as gifts for what? Easter? What's next? What are they
give them to your local city council member or your local school board member or we wrote the book to be an educational tool for people who are trying to, make the world a better place.
This book the thing that I really appreciate is how clearly it's written. And it's easy enough for somebody like me to understand. Please come back, Donald. Thank you so much.
You bet. Look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.